Hello everyone, today we can see the STCR and DRIS approach and its use in fertilizer recommendations. First of all, we can see the STCR, that is the soil test crop response. And then DRIS means the diagnosis and recommendation integrated system, which will be used in the fertilizer recommendations. First of all, we can see what is the STCR approach. The STCR approach takes into account the nutrient contribution from the three measurable sources, that is soil fertility, then added fertilizers, then added organic manures. As we know, the fertilizers can contribute with the nutrient availability or the nutrient balance in the soil. As the fertility, we will have to check the available nutrient based on the based on the soil test or soil testing, and then whatever the fertilizers are added for recommendation with the specific crop, visibly depends on the soil type and the crop wise. And the added manures also, the before sowing of the crops will be the quantity of manure should be added, that is FIM, green manures, or the vermicompost, or poultry manure, or sheep or goat manure. These are the three important measurable sources which will be take into account the contribution of the nutrients into the soil. This is STCR. Then STCR also aim to obtaining a basis for precise quantitative adjustment of the fertilizer doses under varying soil test values and the response conditions of the farmer and for target levels of the crop production. As we know, the STCR is the main aim to analyze the quantitative adjustment of the fertilizer doses, as the fertilizers are required of the specific crop with their responsive stages. Should adjust these doses, and then afterwards will be the application of the nutrients as per the soil test values initial or before sowing of the crops and after harvesting of the crops, and the response condition of these specific crop of the farmers will depends on the to get the target levels of the crop production. And the soil test response, that is soil test crop response approach takes into account the soil available NPK doses required for the target yield, and it's computed by the equation obtained from the calibration. As the this approach also take the analysis of the soil available NPK, that is major nutrients required to get the target yield or the to achieve the yield potential with their computed or compiled with these the equations of the mathematical or statistical equations will be used for the calibration. In short, the STCR approach is the main approach that takes into account the analysis of the nutrients before sowing of the crops, and as per the soil test values the nutrients can be recommended or should be applied. And then also the whatever the nutrients are initially present in the soil means as per the soil test values, a nutrient can be supplied. And this is the STCR approach, that is soil test crop response. And the DRIS approach, the recently diagnosis and recommendation integrated system. This is a meaning of a DRIS approach is suggested for fertilizer recommendations. In this approach, the plant samples are analyzed for the nutrient content, and they are expressed in the ratios of the different nutrients and the nutrients with the others. The suitable ratios of the nutrients are established for the higher yields from the experiment, and plant samples are collected from the farmer's field. As we know, see here, the DRIS approach is mainly where the plant samples and this as well as the soil samples are analyzed, but in case of STCR, only the soil test values or the soil samples are used for the analysis, which where the as per the soil test values the nutrients can be applied with the compared with the responsive stages of the crops as well as recommended doses. But in case of the DRIS approach, where the soil as well as plant analysis samples are collected from the farmer's field, and it will be analyzed with the analyzed in the laboratory, that is both macro and micronutrients. In case of the plant samples, whatever the nutrients or fertilizers are applied to the crops, then should be evaluated or analyze the uptake of the nutrients. And then in case of the soil, the initial or final after harvesting of the crops, the nutrient balance or the whatever the nutrients are present initially, they should be calculated or assessed with the help of DRIS. The DRIS approach, where the nutrients ratios are mentioned, which where the for get the optimum or higher yields. And then if the ratio is not optimum, then the nutrients are supplied or can be supplied with the by means of the top dressing. This approach is generally suitable for the long duration crops, but best tested for the short duration crops like soybean, wheat also. This DRIS approach is mainly used for the sugarcane, then horticulture crops, and then most of these cotton also, and then most of times also used in the wheat and soybean. The modeling of approach, this approach is particularly suitable for recommendations of the nitrogen fertilizer, where the soils are rich in the organic matter as in temperate region. This is a DRIS approach. In short, the DRIS approach is the concept or the approach which is used for the recommendation of fertilizers, where the firstly diagnosis the plant sample as well as the soil sample for the evaluation or analysis of this nutrient availability or the nutrient balance. And as per the ratios of these nutrients which will be used in the DRIS approach for the getting the higher or potential yield. If the ratio is low or the optimum, then the nutrients can be supplied through the top dressing. And this DRIS approach, the soil contribution is estimated on the fact the mineralization depends on the soil type. As you know, the soil temperature is the most important factor for the mineralization process, that is organic to inorganic conversion, which where the y is equal to k in bracket t minus 15 bracket complete into d capital T raised to my into the small n, as where y is the amount of mineral nitrogen, t is the soil temperature, k is the coefficient related to mineralized nitrogen, and n is the constant relating to pattern of nitrogen mineralization, and 15 threshold temperature, and d is the incubation period. As the nutrient use efficiency or especially nitrogen use efficiency for applied fertilizer ranges from 30 to 40%, depending on the nature of fertilizer and the source and management practices. Based on the mineralization of nitrogen during the crop period, the balanced amount of nitrogen is supplied through the fertilizer after considering the nitrogen use efficiency. In the case of the DRIS approach, where the nitrogen use efficiency can be calculated as per the mineralization process of the nitrogen, as the mineralization of nitrogen is depends on the soil temperature. If the soil temperature is increases continuously, then will be affect the mineralization process. And then we have to know the recently today there is a very low nutrient use efficiency, especially nitrogen use efficiency in the rice field. It is only 30 to 40% is the nutrient or nitrogen efficiency is there. It depends on the nutrient source, then the fertilizers nature, and the management practices. As the soil testing, next one we can see the soil testing is the scientific diagnostic tool for evaluation of the soil fertility, for recommending the balanced nutrition to the crops to achieve the profitable higher production, improving fertilizer efficiency, and reducing the environmental pollution. As the soil testing is the main part to analyze the nutrients, to assess the nutrients, or especially recommending balanced nutrition to achieve the profitable higher production, and also improve or increases the fertilizer efficiency, and ultimately reduce the emissions of the nutrients or the gases which will impact on the environmental conditions. The recently now there is the applied fertilizer ratio or the response ratio is decreasing from the 18 to 6 kg and kg per kg of the nutrients. The soil testing, the objectives of the soil testing, that is first one, the assessment or evaluation of the soil fertility at the periodic interval to know the status of the soil health as per the soil health with reference to some cropping and management practices. This is the first major objective of soil testing, that is to assess or the evaluation of soil fertility in a periodic or specific time to know the status of the fertility of the soil with reference to the status of soil fertility, we have to choose these crops or cropping system and accordingly their management practices. Second objective, that is as means to rationalize use of the fertilizer more economically and effectively, as the soil testing is the valuable tool to use of the fertilizers more economically and effectively. Third one, that is to guide the soil management, crop and cropping systems to be followed. As we know, the soil testing is used to manage the soils as per the analysis report, or to as per the soil test values, as the alkaline, acidic or the sodic soil. As per this analysis of these problematic soils, or the as per the nutrient availability evaluation data, to manage these soils, and accordingly soil fertility test values, or the soil test values, the soil crops or cropping systems should be selected or should be followed under these conditions. Then fourth one, that is as mean of monitor the possible deficiency or toxicity. With the help of soil testing, we know the different soil test accordingly soil test values, we know the different deficiencies of these nutrients, and accordingly toxicities uh, of the specific nutrient. The next one, has a important tool for monitor the soil health as well as resilience of the soil, as the soil testing is useful for determination and assessment of the physical, chemical and biological properties. With the help of uh, uh, soil testing, and it helps to increases the soil health as a maintain, or to maintain the soil health and the resilience of the resist soil against different types of erosions. Then assessment of specific soil conditions, which are improved by using the soil amendments. As you know, the different soil amendment, that the material, any material which is used for improve the physical condition of soil as well as chemical and biological properties of the soil. The majorly used in the green biomass or green leaf manure, vermicompost, FOM, or the different kinds of the poultry kinds of the manures which we use as a source of the soil amendments, as well as gypsum and lime, which is used for the reclamation of the soils. As per the soil testing report or the soil test values, we know the details of the problematic soils which will be affected as by salt or the acidic or the sodic conditions, and as per the use the soil amendments for the management of the specific soil. Then also recommended balance and integrated use of fertilizers. With the help of soil testing, we recommended the fertilizers or the integrated use of these organic or the inorganic fertilizers, then to find out the solubility or suitability of the soil for particular crop or fruit plant. As we know, that with the help of soil testing, the it helps to evaluate the suitability of this particular nutrient to the particular crop, and their prediction to likely crop response to applied nutrient. As we know, the predictions of the specific crop nutrient to response is to be uh, evaluated or analyzed with the help of the soil testing. And then success of soil testing depends on the methodologies adopted and interpretation of the result. Suitable method is one of those which satisfy the following criteria, that is, it should be fairly rapid so that the soil test results can be obtained in the reasonable short period, and it should give accurate and reproducible results of the given sample with the least interference during the estimation. And then it should have high predictability, that is significant relationship between the soil test values with the crop performance. As we know, the soil testing is to be followed with the proper method or proper guidelines, and the accordingly interpretation of this result helps to give the rapid reasonable result with the short period, and also the accurate and reproducible result will be obtained, and it will be high predictability, that is significant relationship between the test values with the crop performance. These are the soil testing objective. Next one, the different approaches for the fertilizer recommendations. In case of the DRIS and STCR, where the different approaches are used for the fertilizer recommendation, that is general recommendations based on the soil fertility rating, critical limit based recommendations based on target yield, recommendations based on nutrient index, recommendations for cropping sequences, Then use of simulation models, site-specific nutrient management, that is SSNM, and the diagnosis and recommendation integrated system, that is DRIS. First one, you can see the general recommendations. In this case, these recommendations based on the multi-locational trials conducted on the graded doses of NPK fertilizer. This general recommendations based on the conducting the research or multi-locational trials, which where the major nutrients can be applied, and accordingly yield response to the applied nutrients is worked out, and optimum dose of fertilizer is recommended for individual crop in a given agroecological regions. In these general recommendations, as per the agroclimatic regions or zones where the individual crops are grown, and as per the recommended dose should be applied, and then there will be interact with this yield response. The major drawback with this approach is that the variation in soil fertility is not taken into consideration. In general recommendation, there is no any not be main there is no any consideration regarding the soil fertility variations. This is a major drawback. And then under high or low fertility conditions, applied nutrients prove to be wasteful, remain insufficient. In the as we know, the fertility levels are varies with that is high or low conditions. The applied nutrients cannot be proved effectively, as these specific nutrients are the are waste, or the should be lost or remain insufficient. Then drawback of these general recommendations are the variation in soil fertility is not taken into account or consideration. Under high or low fertility conditions, the applied nutrients are waste or remain insufficient. Second one, the soil test approach. In this, the build-up and maintenance. This approach is maintain the soil fertility for future years. The goal of this approach is to apply the nutrient, then the crop removes, so nutrient level in the soil not limiting the yield. Second, the sufficiency approach. Fertilizers are applied only to meet the nutrient requirement by the crop. The goal of this approach is to maximize the profitability of the given area. The most of recommendations prescribed by the soil testing laboratory are based on this approach. That is, sufficiency approach is based on the whatever the nutrients are required or meet the nutrients for the particular crop. The goal of this approach is to maximize the profit or the profitability of the specific crop. And then third one, that is soil fertility rating. On this basis, the soil fertility soil testing of the particular site or the site is categorized in low, medium, and high nutrient status. The basic cation saturation ratio. The approach assumes that the specific ratio of the cation exists in the soil in order to achieve the higher yield or maximum yield. The most common applied ratio is 65% calcium, 10% magnesium, 5% potassium, and 20% other bases. The ideal cation ratio ensures good CEC, that is cation exchange capacity, and adequate nutrient availability in the soil solution of the crop. As this basic cation exchange capacity or the ratio which where the uh, maintain the good CEC or the adequate nutrient supply with the help of these applied ratios, that is calcium 65, magnesium 10%, potassium 5%, and other bases, that is 20%. Accordingly, these applied ratios which where the helps to maintain the good cation exchange capacity and also the availability of nutrients. Then quantitative approach. This approach uses the soil test values for the available nutrient status and the uptake of the nutrients by the crop. The amount of nutrient that has been to be applied with their difference between the nutrient requirement of the crop of desired level and the amount of nutrient available in the soil. This is a different approaches used in the soil test. Then third approach, that is recommendations based on target yield. As the target yield equations are essentially based on the three-dimensional parameter, that is the nutrient contribution from available nutrients, that is CS, nutrient requirement of the crop per tons of the economic yield, that is NR, and contribution from the fertilizer. As we know, the efficient use of the fertilizer according to soil fertility status and this crop species, the choice of fertilizer recommendations under the fertilizer credit shortage, and maintenance of soil fertility in cropping systems, and identification of suitable crop rotations. These are the four important recommendations based on the target yield to evaluate the identified parameter, that is nutrient contribution, then nutrient requirement, then contribution of the applied fertilizers, that is CF. Fourth one, that is site specific nutrient management. This is a relatively new approach for the nutrient recommendations. It's mainly based on the indigenous nutrient supply of the soil and the nutrient demand of the crop for achieving the target yield. In the SSNM approach, the nutrients can be applied with the response of the crop or demand of the crops, or as per this nutrient supply. You should know or study the nutrient demand or the nutrient response of the particular crop, and as per the demand or response, you should apply the fertilizers to get or to achieve the target yield. In SSNM, the recommendations based on the plant analysis based SSNM, then selection of yield goal, assessment of crop nutrient requirement, then estimation of indigenous nutrient supply, then calculation or manipulation fertilizer nutrient rates, and then dynamics adjustment of the nitrogen rates. Then soil cum plant analysis based SSNM diagnosis and recommendation integrated system, that is DRIS. It represents the holistic approach to the mineral nutrition of the crops and has the impact on the integrated set of norms representing the plant tissues or the soil composition or the environmental parameters and the farming practices as the function of yield of crop. Once such norms has been derived, it is possible to make the diagnosis conditions of the soil and then also limiting the growth and production. The most advantage of this approach is to ability of to make the diagnosis at any stage of the crop development and the list of the nutrient order to order of importance which are responsible for limiting the yield. The development of leaf nutrient guide for making the recommendations of the chemical as well as biology fertilizer to get the economic optimum yield. Then leaf nutrient guide developed at one place can be utilized at all other places. Then trend in leaf content over the period of years may determine whether or not supply one or more elements, and corrections of detective measures and fertilizer applications followed by the growth leading to some problems. This is the soil cum plant analysis based SSNM used in the DRIS. You know the DRIS approach, which where the nutrients can be diagnosed at any stage, which stage for the crop development, which where the nutrients are is a important, which will be responsible for limiting the yield, as the development of leaf nutrient content or analysis of plant sample, which will know the recommendations as per the test values, which will be applied the chemical fertilizers or the organic fertilizers which will be required for getting the optimum yield. As in the DRIS approach, which were also assess or analyze the leaf nutrient content or the leaf content trend of the specific nutrient, which will be used for the recommendations or to get to evaluate the differences in soil as well as uptake of the nutrients, and then also their impact on the environment, and also the corrections of these nutrient measures and the fertilizer applications with the help of DRIS. Then for fifth one, simulation model. As in, we know the simulation is the integrated system which where the computer or statistical and mathematical methods are used, which will integrate to diagnose the nutrient availability or the recommendation of fertilizers as per the responses of the crops, and the soil test values are of the specific or specific agroclimatic conditions, which where the simulation model helps to solve the difficulties to explore the areas where the regions where the crop responses and soil test values for recommendation of fertilizer. In this case, one option is to conduct the expensive field experiment under individual situations for developing the fertilizer recommendation. In the simulation model, which where the conduct different types of these field experiment regarding this fertility or regarding the fertilizer recommendations the different crops. Alternatively, the modern technique of simulation modeling can be used for this purpose. Recently, there is a crop simulation, this statistic model, then the crop model, then mechanistic model, then the statistical model. The different types of models which were used for the evaluation of these fertilizer recommendations. And then sixth one, fertilizer recommendation for cropping sequences. As we know, the cropping sequence means the sequence of different crops which grown in a given period of time, a specific period of time, to get the optimum or higher yield without any investment, or with the getting the higher profit or the maximum yield. The crop sequences meeting the fertilizer needs of the specific crop sequence as the whole is important than those of the individual crops. Legume crop based crop sequence can be taken into account for the lower fertilizer nitrogen dose. As you know, the leguminous are the plays an important role to increase the nitrogen enrichment or the nitrogen sequestration, which where the requires low doses of this nitrogen fertilizer. The use of FIM or green manure crops in the sequence cropping sequence also helps the increasing the availability of these nutrients. The advantages of soil test based fertilizer recommendations: there are the increase in yield, then saving of inorganic fertilizers, maintenance of soil health, optimum management practices, accelerated awareness, then higher economic feasibility. This is today's topic, that is the STCR and the DRIS approach, and they are used in the fertilizer recommendations. Thank you.